It's my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Samuel Brown. Samuel has been a consultant, certified project manager, and trainer in the field of project management with over 30 years of experience. He's been responsible for providing course delivery, subject matter expertise, course development, course maintenance, and instructor development throughout the last 13 years of Global Knowledge. He is also the course director for the PMP Exam Preparation Bootcamp and Applied Project Management courses. Samuel, it's all yours. Let's begin.
All right. Thank you for that introduction, Brent. And thank all of you for joining us and taking an hour out of your day to hear about the changes that are coming to the PMP exam. Well, we've all heard that there are changes coming. In our time together today, we're going to take a look at the PMBOK and the new exam. The PMBOK, as many of you probably know, changes every 4 years, roughly, is the cycle for updating the PMBOK. We're getting close to the time for the new PMBOK edition 7 to come out, but this change to the test will happen before that conversion and release of the new PMBOK 7th edition. So we'll talk about that relationship. We'll take a look at what's changing and when the change is going to take place. And then, of course, as Brent indicated, we'll answer questions in the end. Well, the PMBOK guide is currently in its 6th edition, as most of you probably know. It will continue to be the basis of the new test. Well, let me say that differently. It will continue to be a basis of the new test. The 7th edition is underway and a review draft has been available for a month or two now, I believe. As a matter of fact, that window I may have closed the end of April. I did not double check that before we started. So it will, but the PMBOK guide and all of the knowledge areas, process groups, tools and techniques, and processes will continue to be a solid basis for the test. But the content outline for the test has changed, and it has changed based upon the latest role delineation study that PMI has done. And therefore, with the changes to the content outline, the PMBOK does not remain the biggest source for questions on the test. Historically, the PMP exam, about 70% of the questions came out of or could be traced back to something in the project management body of knowledge. That will no longer be true. And as we get to the end of our time together today, I'll share with you a list of recommended resources that PMI has put together for the new exam. The current exam looks at 5 performance domains: initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, and closing. And you can see the distribution of questions through those 5 performance domains. And each of those performance domains contains certain knowledge and skills and certain tasks that through the questions asked on the exam, they're testing for evidence of. The other thing that has been historically true is that questions on the PMP exam were centered around the predictive kinds of project methodologies. So we were looking at waterfall, incremental or iterative approaches to development like rolling wave planning and so forth. And almost all of the questions on the exam focused on those approaches. In the new exam, these 5 performance domains are reduced to 3 performance domains: people, process, and business environment. And you see half of the questions on the exam will be centered around process, almost half will be centered around people, and the rest will focus on business environment. The way that these performance domains are constructed and explained also has changed slightly. They still focus on tasks, but rather than the knowledge and skill necessary for those tasks, they explain the tasks on the basis of enablers, things that make it possible to fulfill the task. Here's the biggest change in what we're going to see in questions on the new exam. It's going to focus on both the predictive and the adaptive. And within those adaptive questions, there are also likely to be questions about hybrid methodologies where we have tried to blend adaptive and predictive together in some way. And the balance of questions on the exam is going to be about 50-50. So about half of the questions on the exam will continue to be predictive methodology focused or oriented, and the other half are going to be agile, adaptive, and hybrid oriented. Any of us who are familiar with agile are aware that there are a variety of agile approaches. There's agile, there's Scrum, there's XP, there's extreme, there's disciplined agile, and that 50% of questions focused around the adaptive or hybrid could be set in the context of any of those variants of adaptive methodology. So people, process, and business environment, those are our performance domains. And they simply define the high level kind of knowledge that we need. The tasks within each of those domains then describe the responsibility within that domain, and the enabler gives us examples of what that means we need to be doing. But the list of enablers is not everything. It's just a set of examples, and the intention was to give us enough variety in that set of examples to really understand the breadth of the various tasks. Well, as you can see, we've got 14 tasks in the people domain, 17 in process, and only 4 tasks in the business environment domain. But we've got a bunch of enablers spread across those tasks: 53, 61, and 19. Excuse me. So let's take a look and at least get a flavor for the various enablers. Clearly, I have not provided you with all of the tasks or all of the enablers. The point here is to simply give you a sense of it. You can go to pmi.org and download the new content outline and get all of these tasks and enablers for these domains. I'm going to give you a link later where you can download a cross-reference table that shows you how the new stuff maps to the existing stuff. And we're going to look at what's new that doesn't correspond to anything currently as we go forward. So examples of tasks in the people domain: managing conflict, leading the team, supporting performance, empowering the team and stakeholders. This one clearly is a nod toward more emphasis on the adaptive. Okay. Ensuring that folks are appropriately trained for what we need from them, and then of course, team building. Well, what do we mean by leadership? Leading the team. Our enablers: supporting diversity and inclusion, and a big one, an important one for us on the new exam: valuing servant leadership. And servant leadership is the preferred leadership style for all of those adaptive variants. And therefore, it's going to get a lot more emphasis on the new exam. We also want, in terms of empowering, we want to focus around understanding the core skills, the strengths and weaknesses of our team, and get the team focused and organized around those strengths. And we want to delegate decision-making authority to the team to the greatest extent we can and that is appropriate. In the process domain, again, just a few examples. Okay. Task to instill urgency in the way we're executing the project. Manage our communication, pay attention to risk, establish a governance structure, for the project, do the paperwork and keep up with those artifacts, and then, of course, plan and manage how things are transitioned and ultimately closed. Well, again, examples of enablers with assess and manage project risk, determine our options for how we do that, and then iteratively identify and reassess and prioritize those risks we have identified. Clearly, that task and those enablers correspond to things we're already doing and already encouraged to do by the current version of the PMBOK. When it comes to the business, environment, there are only 4 tasks, so I can give them all to you here. Plan and manage project compliance, evaluate and deliver benefit and value, evaluate and address external business environment changes, and support organizational change. You should see in those 4 tasks that the primary focus in the business environment domain is on external influences on the project and the project's impact on the larger organization, which means we should understand organizational change management. There is increasing attention to the overlap between project management and organizational change management, and an increasing recognition that project managers need to have understanding and related skills for managing organizational change. For clear reasons, our projects are driving organizational change in all cases. So what's going to be new? In the people domain, it's going to be that focus on servant leadership. It's going to be an increased emphasis on measuring outcomes, particularly when we train people. We want to know the training has made a difference. We got a little bit of additional emphasis in the 6th edition of the PMBOK with the added executing process, manage project knowledge, and that emphasis is continuing to be added with our move to the new test. Okay. And then greater focus on understanding personality types, understanding personality differences and how to adapt to them, how to utilize and apply emotional intelligence. There's been a little emphasis in the current test on that. It's going to see a lot more of that. This link is the one that will get you to the crossover map that shows you what corresponds and what's going to be different from the current exam and the new exam. All right. And if you don't get this link here, you'll get it in your recording of the presentation and can grab it out of there. In the process domain, a lot more emphasis on delivering value and how we determine that value has been delivered. Okay. The processes that support the evaluation of personality and the decision making in terms of how we adjust to work more effectively with the variety of personalities that we have on pretty much any team, and more emphasis on the need to coordinate between the project and other projects or operations within the business itself. And then, of course, getting the right approach or methodology for the nature of what the project's trying to accomplish. In the business environment domain, there's a lot of new stuff, but as you can see, a lot of that new stuff, well, sorry, my aim's not real good, is focused on the external factors that will affect our project, our ability to deliver. So are there compliance issues which may be internal to the organization but imposed upon the project, or may be imposed by legal or regulatory factors? And a lot of this is about focusing on that and about keeping an eye on things happening in the larger business environment and considering how that affects our project. And we're living through a really good example of that in this pandemic. It's having an effect on all of our businesses. On the majority of them, it's not a positive effect. And so those projects we have that are ongoing, we need to be looking at how this is affecting the project. Is this project still going to be viable, etc.? You're going to get a bunch of those kind of questions on the new exam. Well, 8% of your questions are going to focus around these issues of compliance and external business environment impacts on your project. Clear that out of our way. There we go. So here you've got your recommended references and study materials from PMI. And you can get this same list with a little bit of explanation of each of these, author, etc., more a bibliographic kind of reference from this link, again, on the PMI site. Right? But you notice here, the PMBOK guide is still a key piece of study material, key reference. But we've also got the Agile guide, traditional Agile and hybrid, essential Scrum. So a fair amount of emphasis on those adaptive methods. The systems guide or systems approach to planning, scheduling, and controlling has been a reference on the reference materials list from PMI for over 20 years, because it was on the list when I took the exam 20 years ago. And it focuses primarily on the predictive. But we need to know the adaptive and the hybrid as well. Right? So they've added things to the list to help you better prepare. Excuse me. The good news here is that PMI originally planned to roll the new test out the 1st of July this year. Because of the pandemic, they are delaying the rollout until January 2nd, which means your last opportunity to take the current exam will be December 31st of this year. PMI gives you 3 chances to pass the exam. If you don't pass the first time, you have a required wait of 2 weeks before you can take it again. If you don't pass the second time, you have a required 1 week wait before you can take it the last time, which means as you plan to take the exam, you should plan to schedule your first attempt at the exam no later than the 3rd of December. If you take the test on the 3rd and you fail, you could reschedule for the 17th. If you take it on the 17th and fail, you could reschedule for the 24th. But if you take it much later than the 3rd, you're not going to be able to retake it if you are unsuccessful. If you prepare for this exam and don't take it by the 31st of December this year, then you will have to take the new exam without exception. PMI makes no exceptions. Once the exam shifts over, then that's the only exam that's being offered. However, there is some recent good news for all of us. PMI has put the PMP exam online. And so now when you go to register for your exam, you can choose to take it at a Pearson VUE test center, or you can choose to take it online. The online exam is going to be live proctored. So you're going to have a PC, laptop. Tablets are not allowed, so you can't take it on a tablet. And it's going to need to be equipped with video. And you're going to obviously need a strong internet connection. Now, this link takes you out to obviously the Pearson VUE site, and it gives you the specific system requirements to be able to take the test online. Once you've registered to take the test online, When your appointed time comes, you have to check in. Normally, that only takes about 15 minutes. And in that 15 minutes, you have to submit a picture of yourself and a photo ID. And the proctor has to verify that the face they see on the screen, the headshot, and the photo ID all correspond to one another. And then you've got to give the proctor a video tour of the place where you're taking the exam. So your office, whatever quiet room in your home, whatever, and you've got to do a video tour for them so that they can make sure that you don't have books, papers, reference material, phone within reach. On the online exam, unlike the center-based exam, you do not get scratch paper to work things out on or to do your brain dump on or that kind of thing. For the online exam, they have enabled the online calculator, which was always there, and now an online whiteboard that you will have access to and can do all of your figuring there. And they have enabled it so you can call up both the calculator and the whiteboard at the same time if you need it as you take the exam. Right? And there's one more change worth knowing about. Oh, by the way, if you've already got an exam scheduled and your test center is closed because of the pandemic, and you want to take the exam online, you have to contact the testing center, cancel your current exam, reschedule, and pick online. And PMI is waiving the rescheduling fees that are normally charged. So you can reschedule at this point without a penalty, basically, if you want to change from center-based to online. And then the last change, they have split the exam into two halves. I assume that means after the first 100 questions, you get a 10-minute break. If you're taking the test online, the 10-minute break is the only time that you can get up out of your seat and move out of the proctor's field of vision. During the exam, you cannot get up, move around, talk. You have to sit within the proctor's view 100% of the time. The catch here is, after the break, you cannot go back and review any of those questions from the first half. So the first half is over with the 10-minute break. You then do the second half, and then the two halves are scored together. All right. If you come back late from your 10-minute break, you have been disqualified. So be very, very conscientious about getting back within the 10 minutes. And it's the proctor's timing, the system's timing of that 10 minutes that will determine whether you were on time or not. All right, with that, we get to questions. And I saw a number of questions come in. So let me open that up so I can see it and see what we can answer. Well, the first question, when is the new exam pattern effective from? January 2nd, 2021 is the first day the new exam will be delivered. Second question I've got here, when will these changes be applied to the PMP exam? Again, it's the same answer, January 2nd, 2021. Anytime before that, you're taking the current exam and don't have to deal with the greater emphasis on adaptive or the change in the performance domains up until December 31st, because you can't schedule it on January 1, up until midnight, December 31st, you've got 5 performance domains: initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing. And the 6th edition of the PMBOK is the source for about 70% of those questions. After that, starting January 2nd, you're dealing with the new exam, people, process, and business environment. Where can we find some sample questions? If you follow that link to those, that resource list that I shared with you, I believe the last time I looked out there, they had added some sample questions for you. But I did not look this morning to verify that. But you can also go onto the PMI site and simply look for new questions, and the search will take you there. All right. Let's see. When will you start cutting over your training to map to the new PMBOK version? That's a good question. I'm not the one that gets to make that decision, but typically we will make that cut over about a month, maybe 6 weeks ahead of the change. But don't quote me on that, because I'm not the one that gets to make that decision. Are there sites with sample questions? Other than PMI, I am not aware of sites that are already putting up sample questions for the new exam, particularly since it's been delayed until the end of the year. The closer we get to the end of the year, the more likely we'll begin to see some of that show up on lots of sites, probably including Global Knowledges as well. You have, the question is, how long do you have to take the exam? You have 4 hours to complete it once you begin it. And so 2 hours in, you get your break, you get 2 hours to finish, all right? You have 1 year to get around to taking the exam from the date you are approved. So once you apply, you get approved, then you've got 365 days to get around to taking the exam. But if you want to take the current exam, you're on deadline. You've only got the time between now and December 31st. Will PMI add organizational change management as a knowledge area? I don't know. I don't know that it'll become a new knowledge area. It certainly could. Some of those organizational change management tasks or skills are likely to begin to show up in the 7th edition of the PMBOK, even if it's not added. But I did not have a chance to review the draft of the 7th edition, and so I can't speak to that with any authority. Heard that January 2021 is now scheduled date for the new exam. If so, all right, so we answered that earlier. I can't say definitively, but we typically roll out the new content 4 to 6 weeks ahead of the changeover. Other than the PMBOK guide, what resources would you recommend? Go to that references link that we looked at as we were coming through the material. You can find it in your recording when you go. And Brent, help me out here. I think you put it into the chat, right?
That's correct. It's in the chat.
Okay, so just scroll back in your chat and you can find all of those links that I referenced during the presentation.
And Samuel, I'll make sure those links are included in the follow-up email as well.
Very good. Thank you for that, Brent. How much prep do you typically recommend for a beginner to the PMP? All right. If you've not looked at the requirements for the PMP, you need to be able to document at least 4,500 hours of project leadership experience within the last 8 years. So if you're a beginner and you can't document that kind of experience, then you're going to need to consider going for the CAPM, Certified Associate in Project Management. It is based on the PMBOK alone, at least at this point, and doesn't require anything but an approved application, basically, to be able to sit that exam, which is 3 hours and 150 questions. The PMP exam, if you qualify, but you just barely qualify, recommendations vary widely. I think that you should plan, excuse me, no less than 80 effort hours in preparation. Excuse me, get a drink of water to quit coughing so much. So a minimum of 80 effort hours. I tend to recommend to folks that instead of thinking in time terms, think in terms of taking practice tests and studying until you get to the point where you can pass more than one practice test with an 85% success or better. If you're passing practice tests that you're taking for the first time at 85% or higher, and you can do it more than once in a row, then you're going to be ready to take that exam. I'm on the fence about whether to take the exam before or after the change. Per your professional opinion and expertise, what do you consider to be advantages and disadvantages? Will the PMP credential be viewed more valuable if we pass the new exam? It's a really good question. At this point in time, I think that the view of the credential, its credibility in the market, is probably not going to change significantly. It may, over time, after they start the new exam, and those that want us to have our PMP learn and understand the emphasis on the adaptive as well as the predictive, but I don't think that will be immediate. I do think that if you can get ready, you're better off to take the exam that we have now. And that's because it's been around since the 6th edition came out, well, 6 months after the 6th edition came out. And those of us that help folks prep for it know a lot about it because we've gotten a lot of feedback from students who have been through our courses and taken the exam. And we don't have any direct knowledge of the new exam other than the exam blueprint, the reference list, the crossover map that PMI has provided us with so far. And so our ability to prepare you is much better right now than it will be initially for the new exam. Now, 6 months after the new exam's up and running, we will be back to knowing more than we know right now. And so if you're planning to take it this year, I'd definitely finish getting ready and get it done. If you don't think you're going to be able to take it until June, July, August, or even later 2021, then it is probably not a big deal to wait. Personally, I would not be planning to take the new exam in January or February if I was getting ready, because I'd want the benefit of broader knowledge from those who, broader knowledge of the new exam from those who are helping me to prep. Marla, I'm not sure I understand, not if, when. So you may have to give me a little more insight there. Can you advise on the cost to write the exam? Current costs are $555 if you are not a PMI member, $405 if you are a PMI member. So you get $150 off the cost if you are a member of PMI. Whether or not you get that is determined by your membership status at the time you submit your application. So if you want to join PMI to get the lower price, then you need to join before you submit your application. And The cost of joining PMI is currently $139. So you do the math quickly in your head. What you realize is that if you join PMI, then submit your application, you're going to save $11, which means you can get a couple of Starbucks to help you stay focused as you study. All right, so not if we pass, but when we pass, absolutely, Marla. And we want you to pass. All of our competitors want you to pass the first time you take it, and certainly within the 3 attempts that PMI gives you. We don't want you to end up prepping for the current exam and then having to take the new one. And so we're going to do our best to get you there within your 3 attempts, hopefully within the first one. Excuse me. So Agile project management used for DevOps and SaaS IT implementation. Will PMI provide resources for understanding the technical aspects of this practice? The resources they're going to provide are the ones you see on the reference list, and they're not actually providing them. They're just telling you that those are sources that will help you prepare for the kind of things they're going to ask on the exam. And frankly, PMI has done a pretty good job, excuse me, via their bookstore of making resources available to you as long as you're willing to go buy them. I've got about 2 minutes left, and we'll try to answer as many of the rest of these as I possibly can. How long validity of the exam? I assume that means once you pass, do you have to retest? And the answer is no. But your PMP is only good for 3 years. And during that 3 years, you have to do continuing professional development. And PMI is looking for 60 professional development units during that 3-year cycle. If you report 60, then they renew you for another 3 years. And as long as you're doing your professional development, PMI will let you keep your PMP forever without having to retest. But if you let it lapse, then the only way to get it back is to retest. What's the pass rate? Depends on who you ask. PMI does not publish a pass rate. Global Knowledge says that I think it's 98% of folks who take our prep course pass the exam. And most of our competitors make similar claims. I can tell you that based on the feedback that I get from students, most of my students pass the first time. And I'd say that's probably 60 to 70% of them. Those that don't pass the first time, pass the second time. I have had very, very few students who went through 3 attempts without passing, and it may just be that they didn't want to let me know, but I haven't heard from any student who failed all 3 times and sat through my course. Rewrite
Samuel,
clause.
yeah, I was to be respectful of everyone's time, I'm going to be a jerk and cut you off.
No, that's
But we
fine.
appreciate you so much, going through this webinar and presenting all this information. To everyone still on, if we haven't gotten to your question, if you have additional questions in the chat, I just put my email address. Send them to me. I will make sure that they get answered for you. Um, so again, Samuel, thank you so much, and I hope everyone enjoyed today's webinar. If you'd like to learn more about project management, feel free to check out our website. And as an attendee of today's webinar, we would like to make it super easy for you to take the next step. So use these discount codes to receive 25% off your next Global Knowledge course. So that's webinar 25 in the US and CA webinar 25 in the Great White North, Canada. Finally, be sure to visit Global Knowledge website to access additional free resources like technical articles, white papers, and fantastic webinars like this. So thank you to everyone. Have a great rest of your day.